That's fine. All right. So at the moment, everyone except myself and Pierre are on mute. You guys can unmute yourselves, but we're all friends here, so I'll leave it to everyone to be responsible and not have 30 people trying to talk at the same time. But let me start by saying welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to introduce you all to someone that I met over a year, almost 2 years ago now, originally. And thank you, everyone, for making the time and joining. I know everyone's, got busy schedules, but we're trying to do the best we can during these difficult circumstances. And I know you all probably have done a few of these now during the time of COVID. So it's the closest thing we can do to me taking you all over and visiting Pierre and Meursault at his winery and having you to see it all firsthand. So this is the closest we can get to that. And I want to thank Pierre for making the time. It's 6:00 p.m. in Burgundy right now, and for also being generous enough to provide these samples ahead of time. Get one bit of business out of the way real quick here up front. The wines, our initial allocation of 2018, these wines have arrived. They are, so someone asked me this question yesterday, so I figured I would just let everyone know. The wines arrived 2 days ago into New Jersey. So they are now actually in our warehouse in New Jersey. Perfect timing. So they're here, and you guys have your allocations. So there we go. That's the business part out of the way. So I wanted to start by kind of giving everyone a little bit of a background, a little bit of history, and then I want to turn it over to Pierre and let him talk a little bit about his history and his story and share that with you guys a little bit. He's also got, fortunately for us, he has Wi-Fi throughout his winery, which is where he's sitting right now. So he can take us on a brief tour, show you guys a little bit about what he's got going on there, and then we'll taste some wines after that. So I first met Pierre a little over a year ago. I guess it was November of 2018. I was in Burgundy, and a mutual friend of ours invited me to a tasting that they were holding for about 15 or 20 winemakers in Beaune. I went by, and a couple of winemakers are guys that you all know that we work with, like Etienne Julien and Patrick Hughes was there, and I met this guy. This young guy Pierre was pouring some barrel samples of his first vintage, and I remember tasting with him and talking with him, and I was very intrigued. I definitely thought that there was something there. There was something that I thought was worth investigating, but it was a difficult setting because you had a lot of people crowded around. I wasn't able to spend a lot of time speaking with him. Fortunately, I found myself back in Burgundy a couple of months later, and that same friend arranged for us to go and visit at his winery in Meursault, the old winery. And at that time was the first time I really got to taste and sit down with Pierre and talk with him, and the wines were fantastic. But more than that, I really loved what he had to say, what I was hearing from Pierre, and you could tell. I couldn't believe he is as young as he is, because he had a much more mature sort of approach and outlook and perspective on things, and seemed awfully wise for someone so young. So I immediately started pressuring him to work with us, and I'm sure he found out what it felt like to be my wife when we were dating, putting all the pressure on him. Please come with me. Please come with me. So it's been a journey since then. But I came back, and my partner DNS, who is on this call, who lives in New York, and Dustin, our Illinois manager, can both attest to this. That I was gushing to them about this great young talent in Burgundy, and how excited I was, and how great these wines were. And my worry at that time was that I was actually overselling. And so, like when you hype up a movie and so much that when your friend finally goes and sees it, they're like, yeah, it was pretty good, but it can't live up to the expectations. And that was my big worry. And then I went back to France last year in the summer and tasted once more his 2018s. And they actually were even better than I remembered. So I couldn't be more excited about the future, and both the present and the future for these wines. So you guys, I want to introduce you now and let Pierre talk a little bit about himself. and his history. So many of you already know the story, or at least the general story. You'll recognize his last name, I think, many of you, if not all of you. And yes, his father is Vincent Girardin, of the same name, of the label that you all are probably familiar with. But Pierre has very much his own story. Of course, it's tied to his father, and he owes a lot of where he is today. He owes a lot of that to his father. But I think you'll find that he's forging his own path. And so Pierre, if you wouldn't mind, can you speak a little bit about kind of how you got started, and also you said something to me when we first tasted about how, even though you might be very young, you're not new to this business or to this industry, yeah? So can you speak a little bit about your history and talk about your story to start with?
No problem. Hi everybody, it's a pleasure to be here. Always a pleasure to share my passion about wine. So to start with my story, I was born in a winemaker family. My father, Vincent Girardin, started being a winemaker when he was 18, like I did. But when I was a teenager and when I was a child, I was always going in the vineyard with him, or I was always at the winery to see what was going on there. And the family story is that my parents started in Centenay from 2 hectares, and then my father grew up very fast and settled in Meursault at the beginning of the 2000 vintage, and then they sold everything in 2011 except 2.5 hectares, because my brother and I didn't want to be a winemaker with such a big winery. And I told my parents 4 years later, I want to be a winemaker, but want to do these things way smaller. So my parents at that time made 1 million bottles a year, whereas now I'm making about 50,000 to 80,000, depending the vintage. And thanks to the sale of my parents' winery, I had 2.5 hectares to start with, and then we were looking for new appellations such as Bourgogne to have a nice range to start with. So we bought two more hectares from Bogon Blanc and Bogon Rouge, and now the domain is 4.5 hectares from the Bogon Blanc, Meursault, Puligny-Montrachet that my father still had. And we had Batard-Montrachet from the first vintage in 2018. And then for the reds, we have Bogon Rouge, Volnay Village, Pommard Vigneault, and Bon Hypno Premier Cru. And so this is the domain. And for the other part, so 2/3 of the range is from grapes that I buy, apart from the vines that I farm, and then I buy the grapes, and apart from vines that I choose wisely from only old vines, where I choose my date of harvest and follow all the work of the winemaker during the year, and then I buy the grapes, doing all the vinification, the aging, and the bottling. So that's the concept of Pierre-Vincent Girardin, and I started. So my first vintage was in 2017.
So you talked about the holdings that you own, 4.5 hectares. I think you said Bogon Blanc, Meursault, Batard-Montrachet, Folatière. You mentioned Volnay, Pommard, Vigneault, Bogon Rouge. I think I'm missing one, but that's several, including some Batard, which is great. Great to have. But you make a wide range of wines, so obviously as you mentioned, you're purchasing some fruit. Can you talk about the sources, how you come to find these sources of fruit, and are you buying from a lot of different people, just a few? Let's start there. Start there.
So I buy I buy only on all vines. So this is the main point, and only on the nice Lodi, the most well-known Lodi in each appellation. And in this Lodi, I am trying to look at the best spot for each. And I have several suppliers, and the most suppliers I have, the best it is for one appellation, because I can make a wine more complex. And as I have always a very small quantity of grapes that I can buy, it's better to split these suppliers. So if there is one supplier who is not in my philosophy with organic growing and or respectful from their environment, I can keep doing my appellation and keep the range as it is, but with improving the quality.
So you kind of answered the next question I was going to ask, which is about farming. So both with respect to your vineyards that you own, as well as the vineyards you purchase, for the fruit you purchase, the mentality or the approach to farming, would you call it organic or lutte raisonnée, or how would you describe it?
So for the domain, it's organic, as we are not using chemicals treatment, but we are not satisfied, because the goal in the future is to take back 3 to 4 hectares more for the domain, so to reach 8 hectares in total, and then I might turn organic after that. But I want my full range of domain to turn organic at the same time. And then for the purchasing, I have almost a third of my purchase which are organic, and then a part that I farm myself, so also organically, and then I work only with people who are respectful and pay attention to the vines and also the lunar calendar and all that stuff to do their best to have the best grapes as possible at the end of the year.
Wonderful. Okay. So as you're in your winery, maybe it would be a good time to show people around a little bit, and at the same time you can maybe talk about your approach to vinification and élevage and those things. And also I wanted to mention to everyone on here, Dustin is typing right now in the chat. If you look at the group chat, he's typing all of the wines that we're tasting today and the order in which we're tasting them. So anybody that has a question about that, you'll find it there. Okay, perfect. Yeah. And so let's make a little tour of the winery, right? Yeah.
I hope the Wi-Fi will be okay. If
it's not, we can we'll have you come back to the office. Okay. Oh yeah. If anyone's starting to pour the wines, we are going to do this tasting in the tradition of Burgundy tastings. We will be tasting the red wines first. So start with number 5, and we'll do 5 through 8, and then we'll go back and do the whites.
So to start with, here's the small cellar.
Beautiful.
So as you can see, 2 different sizes of barrel. 350 and 456. So these are twice the size of classic barrel.
And can you talk about the reason behind having 456 liter barrel?
Yeah, so I use 100% of 456 liters for the whites. As when I started, I didn't have any barrel, so I had to buy a lot of new barrel. But to avoid the wood impact, I chose to enlarge the size of the barrel. So these are called double pièce, so twice the classic barrel in Burgundy. And we have less surface in contact from wine to the oak. And the most important, even if it's a brand new cellar, as you can see, very clean and no moistures yet. We have, of course, air conditioning, and the most important, humidity control. So we have always 80% of humidity in the cellar, as if we were on the ground. And thanks to that and those big babies, the big barrels, we have less and less consumption of wine. So it means that there is no oxygen entering the big barrel during the year, or at least less than on the small barrel. So that's why I kept the small barrel only for the reds, as you can see. All the barrels looks clean and new, but I have only a third of new oak maximum for the average. But we clean them inside and outside before putting them in the cellar and before to fill them.
Wow. So in this year, the maximum you said is 1/3 new?
The average is 1/3. I go till 50% for the Grand Cru cuvée and the Premier Cru.
Okay.
But that's a maximum.
Okay.
And as you could see, I have 2 barrel makers, so Chassin and François Frère. So on my first vintage, so 17, I tried like 8 different barrels maker, and the result was obvious, and I chose my 2 favorites taste, and the 2 barrel maker that respect the most the terroir and my wines. And moreover, I have a very good relationship with François Frère, director, as is the husband of my aunt. So we always come and taste very often. So we exchanged a lot, and we were able to do a special toasting for my own barrel. So a toasting that makes the new barrel look like an old one. So there is no makeup, no predominant oak, and that was the goal. And then Chassin, which is new from this year and a bit from last year, was my decision to keep purity and also bring back freshness on this very warm vintage that we're having now in Burgundy.
Important, very important. And then I see the stainless steel tanks as well.
So these tanks are small tanks of 5 barrels. So for my micro cuvée, and everything is thermoregulated. So the black belt is the temperature control belt. And as you can see, we always pay attention for the hygiene. You can eat on the floor, otherwise you shouldn't make a great wine without hygiene now. As the vintage are so warm, all the bacteria are developing very fast on that kind of vintage. So we pay very attention to that. So here's the white winery. So we have twice the amount of tank that we have of cuvée to welcome the previous vintage in the closed tanks, and then the fresh pressed juice on the platform bill, so on the tanks where you can choose the amount of wine that you put, and everything is thermoregulated. So from the vinification to the bottling, we control the temperature, and we play with the yeast, with the indigenous yeast. So all the cuvées have their proper yeast, and that's how you get the identity of each one. And these are the new pommes that respect the most the wine for now in the wine world. And we are also doing gravity thanks to the high roof for the Grand Cru cuvée.
So Grand Cru you only do by gravity?
Yeah, most of them, except the Corton-Charlemagne. It depends which kind of barrel do we have, but
okay.
But all the reds and Batard and Montrachet, are made by Gravity. And here's the red winery and the bottling room.
Beautiful.
So
now you mentioned
yeah.
you mentioned Montrachet, which sadly this year I missed. I didn't get any Montrachet, but for everyone on the call today, we will have a few bottles next year, maybe, perhaps.
I hope so. I do only one barrel a year, so I try to split the barrel as fair as possible between all my
Okay.
friendly customers.
All right, that's fair.
So here in the red winery, we split. We keep few big tanks here where we put the biggest cuvée, the Bourgogne, Volnay, Pommard, and here we can take off these big tanks and put smaller one in front of them from 10 to 15 hectoliters. So we can vinify 1 to 3 barrels for the micro cuvée for Premier Cru and Grand Cru from Cote-de-Nuits.
Beautiful. And I should mention that to everyone, I think you can probably tell that this winery is pretty new just by looking at it. This is a brand new facility that Pierre finished last year, yeah, just before the harvest.
Yeah,
is that correct?
First vintage in 19.
Okay, yeah.
So it has been a big change for me, and moreover for the reds, as now I could control the temperature as I wanted, and that's how I stopped totally punching down and reduce my extraction and improve also and adding more and more wall cluster for the vinification.
So those changes you just talked about, no more punching down, just pumping over, gentle extraction, including some more whole cluster. These changes started with the 2019 vintage, which was in this new facility.
I did a few tries on 18, but the temperature control wasn't as accurate as now. But the experiments were very good, so that's why I do it even stronger on 19 vintage. I did it, and now I really stopped doing any punching down. No more délestage, only remontage, so pumping over. And because when you punch down on a tank where you have a lot of whole cluster, you will extract the greenness, and that's what shouldn't be done for the reds. And thanks to that, we have very silky tannins, and all the terroirs are reacting differently and have their own identity, because the color is not the same. As we are not doing extraction, we are not looking for precise color. All the cuvée has their own property, and that was the goal of that, to have each wine very different from the other. And here's the tasting room with
the name on the wall of the cuvée, the Bogon Blanc and Bogon Rouge cuvée.
Éclat de calcaire, that you can translate with a split of limestone, or Dustin can give us a better translation, maybe.
Yeah, like crack, like how would you say that? Éclat, I don't know.
Éclat is like a bolt, like a lightning bolt, essentially.
When you're crushing limestone.
Yeah. Or like a split, like a fresh crack of limestone.
Yeah. Great.
We are adding some limestone in the barrel for this cuvée.
I know you're joking. Thank you for doing that, and the Wi-Fi worked very well, so everyone could see. I appreciate that. And
that was the first time that it worked, so I'm glad that.
Oh, that's good. That's good. We're lucky. So that gives everyone an idea, and I think now that you guys have heard Pierre speaking a little bit more about himself and about his approach and the way he's thinking about things, it's hard to believe he's 20. Are you still 21 or are you 22 now?
I'm turning 21 next month. 22. I'm 20. I'm
22. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I'm 21 for now.
Crazy. But as he told me when I think I asked him when we were tasting, I don't understand how you can make wine this good on your second vintage at 21 years old. And he said he made his first wine when he was 15. So, you know, it's a little different, right? Is that correct? 15 when you made your first wine?
I did few experiments when I was 15. Then when I was 16 and 17, I tried to do it on my own before I was working with my dad. And in 17, so when I was 18, for the 17 vintage, I did my first vinification on my own. Just my dad was just controlling and making sure that I wasn't doing things crazy. But it worked well and on an easy vintage, so it was better for me to start with 17. And then when you start, you can't stop. When you like it and when you have passion about wine, it's always asking questions to yourself how to go further and how to make a better wine each year. So, and then I had some new appellation also, which is very exciting for me as a young winemaker to discover all the different terroirs and lieux-dits from Burgundy. And as you can see, I have several cuvées of Meursault, and I grew up in Meursault, so it's very close to my heart to depict all the lieux-dits and different terroir climat from this village to show the difference and shades between the soils, the exposition, the heights, and also the way of different farming that impacts the final wine.
Love it. That's great, man. Well, let's see, we're about 30 minutes in. So I think in the interest of time, maybe we start tasting some of the wines and you can talk about them a little bit. Because I also want to leave a little bit of time in case people have questions at the end or during that they want to ask. So, so how about we do that? Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, perfect. Let's start.
All right. So we're starting with the first red, which is the Bogon Rouge. And I think a good place to start is maybe talking about where the vineyard or vineyards are located for your Bogon Rouge.
So for the Éclat de Calcaire Rouge, we have 3 different plots, 2 in Pommard and 1 in Volnay. So we have lieux-dits in this Bourgogne regional appellation, which are Volnay-Montpoulain, Pommard-l'Aumône, and Pommard-Maison-Dieu. So these are all below the main road, which separate the Bourgogne and the appellation Pommard and Volnay, but they are on a little slope. You have the flat area, and then it goes like a bit like this, where you have more and more limestone than the very flat area where there is a lot of clay. So that's also why I called my cuvée Éclat de Calcaire, because the nature of soil dominance is the limestone.
And that's an important point. I remember me and you talking about this, and I had been in this area of Pommard in the vineyards with another winemaker several years ago, and talking about this very thing. But for those of you who may not have been or been to this specific area in Pommard, you can see when you're standing on the road that divides the appellation Pommard on one side and on the other side Bourgogne. You can see how the land goes down into a depression, and then it comes back up as Pierre was describing. There's like a mound where the land comes back up, and when you look at it, it doesn't make any sense. You would think the part below the road should actually be Pommard, and the part on the other side that's in this depression should actually be Bourgogne, because when it rains, the water just fills up there, it floods. But it's more of a politics, yeah? I mean, the reason why it's classified this way?
Long time ago, it was Pommard appellation, but then they reduced the area of Pommard. But you have this lieu-dit because before they were classified as Pommard village.
Yeah. So you can almost think of this as a Pommard that we're drinking. So that's the point. So you, real quickly, can you just maybe speak about for the Bourgogne, the vinification, the élevage here, oak and tank and everything?
So this is the only cuvée from the reds where I use only big barrels. So 456 liters. Then all the other reds are from classic barrel from Burgundy. So I did 20% of wort cluster for this cuvée. Only one punching down at the very beginning, and the aging is around 10 months in barrel, and then I wait always 3 months in tank before bottling, because I bottle from tank on the lees, and to avoid the wine to get dry. So always filling the wine with the lees for all the whites and reds. And for the Bourgogne, I do a smaller, shorter aging compared to the other appellation, and a smaller percentage of new oak. So it's only 15% new oak for this cuvée.
Well, I think the first wine, you know, the one thing I was nervous about, a little bit nervous about today, was just how things would show, because obviously Dustin spent basically all day on Monday preparing all of this samples for everyone, but we had 3 bottles of each wine to divide amongst everyone. So he had to, with a funnel, you know, divide these into all the vials. So the wines were open on Monday and then transported all around the country. And so you never know, but so far the first wine, it smells beautiful, I think, and it's showing absolutely beautifully. And a great example of Bourgogne.
I did, when I was a teenager, I did a lot of tasting with my father from a lot of domain in Burgundy, my father's old wine. And a lot of wine decrease very fast after a few years bottling. And I really wanted to make wines for long term. So you will feel for both red and whites a little reduction, as I have nitrogen everywhere in the winery. So when I pump or when I do it by gravity, I chase the wine thanks to nitrogen to avoid any oxidant to enter into the wine. So that protects the wine naturally. And thanks to that, I try to avoid putting too much sulfur for the red wine. For the white wine, I protect them as everybody now in Burgundy, I think, but I add nitrogen to go further and make sure that in 20 years they still get some freshness.
Yeah, and actually, I was planning to talk to you about this and have you speak a little bit more about it, especially when we get to the whites, because you and I have talked about the good reduction. I think as we had a conversation about that one of the first times we tasted together, and you have some thoughts on that, but I think it's especially important in whites. Maybe we save that for when we get to the white wine. We'll talk about what you mean by good reduction.
No
someone
I think we have a question.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah, we have a question now about I didn't know if you could see the chat. So yeah, the differences between you and your father. Good question.
So first of all, I learned everything from my father, and then I brought also my new ideas of a young winemaker. But my father had all the technical skills, but he didn't have the same style of winemaking as me, and he couldn't do what I'm doing now for farming, because the winery was too big and they own more than 30 hectares. So the big difference is the size. Now I'm working as a human size. Everything is tailor-made. I know each barrel of my cellar, and for me that's the most important point, to handle and control everything. I know each bottle of how can I say?
Well,
I know. Je sais qu'en chaque goutte de vin there is no, il n'y a pas de hasard. And
there's nothing
no
left
risk. There's nothing left to chance.
Yeah, everything is made on purpose, and all the details that you add to the other details just make you improve the quality. But the big difference is the size, because now I can do the vinification that I want thanks to the small cuvée that I have. And these are things that you can't do on a cuvée of 10 barrels, because you can't control the temperature as everything is rising up too fast. The fermentation is not as regular as you would want. So that's the things now that I control and that you can't do in a big winery. Then I think my tastes are also very different. I told my father when I was 17, when we started to exchange a lot about wine, that his wine were too oaky. And
how did Papa react to that?
He said, I agree, but he needed that. But that's why I found a solution to avoid this oak impact and change the way of aging the wine.
Wow, that's great, man.
It's impressive.
You know, I've worked with many winemakers in Burgundy over the years, and I feel like many of them arrive at this same place when they're 40 years old. About the way you're viewing the élevage and vinification and everything, and to get there at 17 years old, to arrive there at 17 years old is very impressive. So,
no, it was maybe like childish question and very innocent. How can I say?
Yeah. It's the same word in English.
Innocent question, but that really makes a difference. And then to go further, to have better grapes from our vineyards, we change a lot in the farming. So we turned organic since my first vintage. I chose to rise up all my canopy, my trellising. So I took off all the wooden sticks from 80 centimeters, and I put some 1 meter, 20 centimeters wooden stick to make sure that my vines will be higher. And at the end of the cycle, as I cut them, I cut the apex only once. They reach 1 meter 60, 1 meter 70, and I can do a little tress to make sure that they don't fall. But
if I understand, I was gonna just say, if I understand this correctly, the reason for raising the height is to lower the impact of the humidity, so you don't have so many problems with oidium and mildew.
That's one point, and then we have more shadow in the vineyards, so the berries are not sunburned, as we can have a lot of sunburn in the vintage that we are having now. And because we harvest under 35 Celsius degrees, so that's crazy.
95 Fahrenheit, yeah.
And when the grapes, the berries comes to the winery, they are still very hot. And thanks to the high canopy and shadow in the vineyards, we keep the balance and also the acidity, because it's not only the sun that burns the acidity, but also the average of temperature. And when you bring back some freshness and cooler temperature thanks to the higher vine, you have a more balanced berry. And moreover, I realized that I had both phenolic and sugar ripeness coming together, instead of having 1 week or 2 weeks difference, so that makes me able to do wines with freshness and salinity, acidity, and of course density and complexity in mouth. Not only very fine, not too refined wine, but still some structure, without being tannic for the reds or too sharp for the whites.
That's great. That's really interesting, and clearly you're thinking about every detail. So that's nice to see. So explains why your wines are so good. So. So I have the second wine in my glass. I'm sure everyone is already also tasting, but this is now the Océ du Reste. Can you just say a couple of things about maybe this vineyard, about the Premier Cru of Les du Reste?
So this is a very old vine of 80 years old. It's the best spot in Océ du Reste as it's east exposition. So very sunny for this appellation. As it's a very cold and fresh appellation, sticking into not the mountains, but you have a lot of hills, so a lot of wind and not the same weather as you have on the main Côte-de-Beaune. So thanks to this the exposure, we always get some ripe berries, and that's also for my thought that this is the best lieu-dit in Océ du Reste. And thanks to that, I was able to do a lot of 4 cluster in it. So between 50 and 55% of 4 cluster. Wow. And without punching down for this one.
Awesome.
So you can smell this wild perfume from roses and crushed fruit.
Very much, yeah. Much more floral and perfume than the first wine.
Which weren't crushed at all. So that's the tricky things.
Yeah. Wow. Oh wow. I just poured the Volnay, the next wine. So. So the Volnay, how many lieux-dits or sites or parcels, whatever, are going into the Volnay? Kind of talk about that.
There are 3 plots, 2 from the domain and 1 from Grapes de Taille. So you have les Échards, les Aussy, and les Serpents.
Okay.
And from 17, I had also les Grands Champs, but I stopped. As I told you, if the grapes are not good enough, I stop buying from some people, and that's why now for the future I will reduce more and more the purchasing grape to increase my domain and have always a regular quality, and I will only buy on the very, very old vines where I get small yields and only Mirandage berries.
Very small berries.
That's the goal for the future, and that what I did in 19 and 20. Wow. And so these 3 lily, I blend them together after the aging. So if there is a cuvée that doesn't fit with it, I put it apart and I will age it differently and keep it for aging in bottle in my cellar and release it later. That's what happened with the Grand Champ in 2017.
Oh, interesting. So one day we can look forward to a library release.
Maybe. No, in the future, I try to keep 10% of my cuvée to release them later. But
nice.
That's a goal for me.
Seeing that more and more, I feel like more and more people are trying to do this now, which is very smart. And everyone loves aged Burgundy, so that's great.
This is even more important for me as a young winemaker, as I don't have anteriority and all vintages. When people are coming to taste, for example, this year the 19s, at the end of the tasting, I say I will bring back a very old vintage for me, and I bring back a 17 or 18. But,
yeah.
I'm looking forward in 10 years to see how my cuvée and my vintage are behaving. But that was exciting about wine. It's very lively product and always changing. Yeah. But this is this might be a good things to do for splitting the samples and open it before for very young vintage, as it was bottled at the beginning of the year and only 6 months of bottling. It's better to open them before, a few hours or 1 day before, or just put it in the decanter to make sure that the wines open up when you want to drink it.
Sure. We have one more red, and that would be the Pommard, the Grand Hypno, that we were able to sample as well. So I think this is a vineyard many people know, but maybe you can talk about this terroir a little bit.
So this is the small Grand Cru of Pommard with the Pommard Regin. Here, this is a plot that we farm, which is close to the Clos de Vougeot, Hypno EAUX, situated in the Grand Hypno. So I do 2 cuvées of Hypno, the Petit and the Grand, which I split, because these are very, very different terroirs. In the Petit Hypno, we have a lot of limestone and a very poor soil, whereas in the Grand Hypno, we have a big density of clay and white clay with white marne, which give also a lot of minerality into the wines. And for the little story, that there is no quality difference between Petit and Grand Hypno, but the Petit were given to the farmers because the rows are way smaller and not easy to, and the vine are not easy to make, whereas the Grand Hypno were given to the noble family and people with castle, because you have rows of 450 meters, and you can do 1 barrel per rose. So that's the story of the 2 different terroirs, where you have different in the soil and also in the situation underground and at the surface.
That's interesting. I never heard that story. Thanks. And as far as vinification here in Élevage, it's more or less like the previous, or?
I did 50% new oak, 50% wall cluster.
Okay.
This is the older vine compared to the Petit Hypno, and you don't feel that much the wall cluster compared to the Petit Hypno, which is a bit greener because of the age of the vine. But that I did the 2 wines the same vinification, same aging, and they will be bottled the same day for this year. And last year it was the same things. So this is a way for me to understand the different terroirs in Côte-de-Beaune and go further for the next year's vinification. But I think in Pommard we have to change the vinification, stop the punching down, and avoid the strong and root tannin to go and find the real noblesse of the terroir of Pommard.
Wow. I mean, to me, it's I think it's unmistakable that it's Pommard for sure. When you put your nose in the glass, you can tell it's Pommard. But I would not say this is rustic Pommard. I mean, it still has very refined, I think, tannins for Pommard, especially. And I think it's a wonderful effort. So thank you. So that's the 4 reds that we have to sample. Just to give you guys an idea and to hear a little bit about how Pierre is working with Pinot Noir and his approach there. Hopefully that's instructive. Obviously there's many more cuvées, but I think this gives you an idea anyway of what he's doing with Pinot Noir and his approach. I want to move to the whites and try to try to keep things moving so we're not going too long and allow time for people to ask more questions and get some more thoughts. But anybody that has a heart out, I want to try to get these whites in here while we still can, under an hour anyway. So let's jump to the Bogon Blanc. And like with the Bogon Rouge, maybe you can talk about where these vines are located. I think that's a good place to start. I think you're on mute right now, Pierre. You're muted, the audio.
Okay.
There we go. Now we got it.
My first time on Zoom.
Really?
Yeah.
I love it.
For the Bourgogne Chardonnay, we are 80% from Meursault, so 2 different plots, one from the Mani and one from the Herbeux. These are regional appellation located in the middle of the village, next to the houses on the east side of Meursault. But
So these are above the road, yeah?
Above the road. So
yeah.
It means very good position for Bourgogne, very rocky. And then I have 20% of the cuvée coming from the same plot as in the red from Volnay, Montpoulin, where I get both Chardonnay and Pinot Noir in the same plot, but half. And this brings back some density to the wine, as there is more clay in Volnay. But you have to know that the Meursault terroir is way more limestone dominance than Puligny and Chassagne for the Bourgogne appellation, as we have a lot of clay in Chassagne and Puligny on the flat area. And that's why I really love Meursault. Of course, I grew there, so that's easy to say. But we have the best soil for Bourgogne and village appellation, for my thought, as we have different shades between the exposure, the amount of limestone, which is above 15 to 20% of active limestone, which fits the roots of the vine and give this salinity and minerality to the wines.
Well, there's definitely a lot of salinity and minerality in this wine. You can taste incredible. And for the élevage, you do a similar, only large barrels for this, or?
That's it. It was my first experiment on big barrel were on the Éclat de Calcaire 17. And that's how I could have already old barrels for 18 vintage of 456 liters. And I realized that I wanted to do the same aging for all my whites to really show what the terroir, the climat, so the climat englobe, I mean, le climat comprend, how can I say? in the climat statue, you have the terroir, the location, the heights, the type of soil, and the way of farming. And you need to find all these different elements to be translated into a wine. And that's what I'm doing by making the same aging for all my whites. So that means 12 months in barrel, in these big barrels, and then 6 to 8 months in tank, with one fining and no filtration.
And so you're doing the same for Bourgogne and also for Batard-Montrachet.
That's
yeah. It. Okay. Oh, okay. Good. That's good to know.
But the difference are made with the different kind of yields, the different type of soil. But I'm pressing very strong to extract the biggest amount of lees as possible. And then I put in the thermoregulated tanks, as you've seen before, for 1 day at cold temperature, and all the big and bad lees are going at the bottom of the tank. And then the day after, I put everything in the barrel, and then the fermentation starts and happens only in the barrel.
Okay, that's good to know. So not in tank, you're doing the fermentation, alcoholic fermentation is in the barrel.
Both alcoholic and malolactic fermentation.
Okay, interesting. That's good info. So this is the Bogon Blanc. The next white we have is this Saint-Aubin, the Saint-Aubin Premier Cru. This is from Mougères des Dents de Chien. Can you talk about this vineyard a little bit, maybe, and the terroir of Saint-Aubin?
So this famous lodi of Meursault is just above the Montrachet hill. So, but we're on the top of Montrachet, so on the Mother Rock. So you have a very, very tiny underground soil, so less than 50 centimeters. So the roots can go deep in the growth soil, but it directly goes to rock and limestone. So that gives this wine a very flinty and helps for the reduction with this pierre fusée and how can I say, like fireworks smell, like if you were crushing.
Yeah, like flint or gunpowdery almost. Yeah.
And
cool.
This terroir is very, very exciting for the warm vintages because the vines suffer a lot, and the roots takes the most as they can from this limestone, and that's how you get the best minerality. And you have also smaller yields, so it makes pretty good wine on even for Saint-Aubin, which is an appellation where usually you have thinner and smaller wine with a shorter mouthfeeling. But this famous lieu-dit for Premier Cru, such as Romilly, is a very complex appellation.
Frank is asking, the Blanc is, I'm assuming you mean the Bourgogne Blanc, the Éclat de Calcaire, from a single vineyard? No.
It's three different plots.
Yeah.
He
said two in Meursault, in the kind of the middle of the village, and then one in Volnay.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, let's talk a little bit about wine number 3. White number 3 anyway, which is the Puligny-Montrachet village.
So the Puligny-Montrachet is a blend of two different plots. One from Les Charmes, Puligny-Les Charmes, which is just below the Puligny Premier Cru Perrières, and one from the Puligny village, La Corvée des Vignes. So it's just next to the where you got the un cimetière, the
which?
A cemetery.
Yeah,
cemetery.
From Puligny.
Okay, so yeah, right in the middle. Yeah.
Extra terroir there.
Yeah. So on the north side of all the plots are on the north side of Puligny, so close to Meursault. I think we have a question from.
I said I got confused. Single soil type, not vineyard.
The soil type dominance is of course limestone from 80% from Meursault, and then a smaller part of 20% where you have both limestone and clay, but they are equal. So there's no limestone dominance on Volnay side, but the main origin is from Meursault with this limestone specialty. And so for the Puligny, we are, as I told you, the Puligny village are flatter than the Meursault village, so you get more deepness and larger wine. So with might have a deeper mouthfeeling.
Yeah, for sure. It's got some more density, I think. And you can see, I mean, you can really see it when you first open the bottle. But I think even after a few days, as we explained, you know, with opening them on Monday for the shipments, you can still get a strong sense of that reduction we talked about. So I mentioned that earlier, where we had a conversation about the good reduction. Do you want to speak a little bit about kind of the philosophy, why that's a good thing to have some reduction in wine, especially white?
It's a natural way to protect the wine, because you have two different phases: reductive phase and oxidative. And of course, I think you prefer fresh white wine than oxidated one or premix. So I do my best to protect the wine from the vinification till the bottling. The only time the wine is facing oxygen is under the press, as I let everything, all the microorganisms that can oxidize, I let them oxidize under the press, and then I turn I put the juice at very cold temperature to protect it, and then during the fermentation you have all the CO2 that will protect the wine. And then the next step is making all our process under nitrogen, so still no oxygen, and the only oxygen that the wine will meet after the press is your glass of wine. And then this is your choice to open it up more or less to discover the different level of reduction. For me, reduction is the same thing as wort cluster vinification. It brings some another step for the aromas and another dimension for the wine.
And also
way more expressive.
And exactly, and I think if I understood correctly when we were speaking too, and my belief has always been, when I talk about the good reduction and when you talk about the good reduction, it's more about a result of very good, clean winemaking. Because you can have reduction, you can have a lot of reduction in a wine if you just dump 200 milligrams per liter of sulfur, right, in the wine. But that's not the good reduction, you know. That's the good reduction is coming from this way of working all throughout, from pressing to aging, vinification, aging, bottling, everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And you will see on the next one, you have different kind of reduction, because each terroir gives its own reduction, because this noble reduction mostly come from the lees, and the lees are specific to each vineyard. And a vineyard located 100 meters from another will bring some indigenous yeast totally different. And that's what will make the different shades between these two wines, even if they are 100 meters far from each other.
It's very interesting, and yeah, for me these definitely have that good reduction, you know, where you can see it's from very clean fruit, very clean lees, you know, good winemaking, good aging, all of that. So that's what you want to see in a wine. So you mentioned the next one, the Meursault. That's the last wine. That's the last one we're having, which is the which one do we do? The Meursault Narvaux, yeah? Yeah, Meursault Narvaux is the last wine. So and then we have a question which we'll talk about after. First, talk about the Meursault Narvaux, and then I want to talk about David's question.
Yeah, no problem. So the Narvaux for me is the best lieu-dit as a Meursault village, because it's located just above the Meursault-Perrières and Meursault-Genévrières. And before, it wasn't classified as Premier Cru because it was too high, and the grapes were never ripe enough in the past, and it was always between 10, 11 alcoholic degree, whereas now we have perfectly ripe Meursault Narvaux, but still a lot of freshness, and vines that give the best as they can, as they are living on rocks and Marne Blanche. So this is a very hard situation for the vines. So that's why they give a lot to survive, and Of course, you have smaller yields because of that, but more exciting wine thanks to that.
That's fantastic, and that's a great piece of information, you know. And we talk a lot about, of course, especially the last 10 years or so, we really talk a lot about the change in climate everywhere around the world, and some people are understandably concerned and maybe worried about these changes, but maybe there's some benefits, like you get a village vineyard that maybe is more on the level of a Premier Cru now. So
yeah, things are changing.
Yeah, sometimes there's a silver lining, as we say.
Maybe in 20 years, in Champagne they will make still wine.
Yeah, good still wine. Yeah. So the question from David was, after we talk about the whites, if you could say something about the Champeau vineyard in Gevrey-Chambertin, one of his favorites, which a couple of people may have received a little allocation. I think our total allocation for that was, I think, 24 bottles. So not everyone's going to receive some, but sadly, maybe talk about that vineyard a little bit.
So the Champeau for me is the best with the Lavaux Saint-Jacques. As you are at the end of the combe of Lavaux, but turning to the main coast, so Cote-de-Nuits, and this crossing over, this cross, brings two type of clima, and that's how you get a lot of freshness on this very rocky terroir, and it has always this rustic dominance from Gevrey, but the goal for this unification was to do nothing and just let the terroir express itself. So on this cuvée, I did only one remontage per day, but only 5 to 10 liters just to make the cap,
make the cap wet a little bit.
A little wet, but that's it.
Yeah.
And for me, for this great terroir, that's the best way to extract them. Just doing nothing and let the grapes do the work, if it was picked up with a very good maturity. So for the whites, I try to harvest a bit earlier, so that I can still have this very vivid and energetic salinity mixed with acidity. But for the reds, now I try to wait the longer as possible to make sure that both phenolic and sugar ripeness are here. As I put now a lot of whole cluster for the vinification, I need my bunches to start turning into brown color, so that I can pick up the grapes.
Wow, that makes sense. Yeah. And now we have a question from Patrick. There seems to be a through line from the Vincent Girardin wines, reds. The main diversion in style seem to be the drinkability in their youth. Vincent Girardin wines are always so chiseled. I don't know how to translate that.
You want me to translate?
Yeah,
il dit qu'il trouve un semblance avec les vins de votre père. Mais la différence dans le style, c'est qu'ils sont plus buvables et potables dans leur jeunesse, que les vins de votre père étaient vraiment ciselés, structurés.
I think my father did a lot of extraction, and for the last from 2007 he stopped winemaking. He had an enologist who was making the wine, so he didn't decide anymore the style of wine, and it was for me to extract it, and that's why I try to not reproduce, just as I told you, let infusion and gets only the best from each vineyard, and I will never force Bourgogne or Village to be a Grand Cru. if you don't have the potential, you shouldn't go further in the extraction to get something that you will never have. So that's my my philosophy.
Makes sense. Very good. So before we go, I wanted to open it up. If anybody has any more questions, feel free to ask, or type in the chat, or unmute yourself. Although maybe that's dangerous, but if anybody has any other questions they would like to ask, now's the time. One thing I was going to ask, while we have a winemaker in Burgundy who's working in both the Cote-de-Nuits and the Côte de Beaune, might be a good opportunity to ask your thoughts on 2020, this year as a vintage, and the harvest for both red and white. What do you think?
It was a very tough vintage for the dates of picking, because everything was almost right at the same time. So we had to be very accurate. And this year I chose to start it with the whites, to make sure that they won't be as ripe as 19, because 19 was the hottest and the warmest year that we never had in Burgundy history since for a long time. And I learned from my mistake, even if the 19 are, I think, are tasting really good now after put them in tank, and they are getting fresher and fresher. But I wanted my 2020 to be the fresh as possible. And after the fermentation, I realized that these are the best whites that I ever had in my cellar for the aromas, and the analysis confirmed everything. These are the perfect balance for pH and acidity, pH and basic base for the wine. And then for the reds, I told myself that I really wanted to do some work cluster in this vintage, to make sure to get rid of this acidity, because 20 is a vintage with a lot of acidity, as we are harvested very early. And we needed to, because I started on the 22nd for the reds. And I started on the 20th for most of my Premier Cru and Grand Cru whites. It happened in 2 days. It was very fast and perfect timing. And then I did my Meursault village from the 23rd to the 25th. But the reds, I started on the 22nd for 1 day, only for 2 vineyards, which were 15.2 alcoholic degree on the 22nd of August. And that was crazy. And I told myself, should I wait or should I go? And my neighbor from my vineyards started 1 week later and had 17 alcoholic degrees. Wow. And the fermentation will never end. So I think this year we had to harvest a bit earlier than last year, because we need the fermentation to end and avoid any volatile or bad taste in the wine. So it was a tough decision, but I think I'm really happy now with the wine that are in my barrels. So I feel confident with this vintage. But we had a very, very small yields for the reds, like 40% of the yields, and a full yield for the whites.
Man, that's crazy. I haven't heard that, but I can't imagine 17% in Burgundy. That's unbelievable. Like Châteauneuf.
Porto or Châteauneuf. I can't imagine how the Rhone Valley will handle this kind of weather. Yeah. But now that's why changing all the trellising and making the vines higher for me is one of the solutions in the future, to make sure that we can still doing Burgundy style wine and have our own identity of Pinot Noir and not turning into another grape.
Yeah, you don't have to replant with Syrah. Wow. Well, we're an hour and 15 now. I know some people already had to leave. I don't know if there's any other questions that anyone has for Pierre while you have him, but if not, maybe it's a good time to wrap up and let Pierre go to have some dinner. I'm sure you're getting hungry.
Yeah, almost time.
So yeah, I think it's probably a good time to say salut and to everyone, and thank you again, mostly to Pierre for joining us and taking time and with the samples and for sharing your knowledge and everything with us. It's been really great. So I'm so excited about selling your wines.
Thank you very much for all the organization, Todd, from you and your team, and I hope everyone enjoyed the wines, and you should taste some other cuvée to see the differences. It's very interesting to taste one Meursault with another or one Pommard with another to see the different shades between all this clima, and I will do all my best in the future to going even further and having very identitary wines for you to enjoy.
Well, I think that's very clear to everyone that was able to join this call today. That I don't think anyone is going to question your effort on making the best wine that you can. So that seems clear. But yeah, thank you, Pierre. Thank you to everyone for joining. And if anybody has any other questions, they can shoot me an email if anything pops up. But otherwise, look forward to hopefully seeing all of you guys in person soon. I miss a lot of you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Ciao. Bye, Pierre. We'll talk soon, okay?
Thank you, Pierre. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Ben.
Bye, guys.
This is the weekend.
See you in the US in the future.
Coming up for Texas.
Bye-bye.